Welcome to session 5 of Keep Indiana Learning's book study on the anxious generation. My name is Melissa Wally, and I'm an innovation coach here at Keep Indiana Learning. I work for Hanover Community Schools as a technology coach and ed tech specialist. And today we are discussing chapters 9 and 10 of the anxious generation. And these chapters are starting to focus on collective action and measures to improve the technology-based childhood that has become so common now. So as always, Diana Knox is here to dissect the chapters, and Amy Stevens has also joined us as well this week. So thank you, Amy, for being such a consistent guest to our book study. I know that you are so passionate about this topic. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Amy Stevens, and thank you so much for having me. I feel like I've missed one, and I'm upset about that because I had that fear of missing out. But I, too, am a Keep Indiana Learning innovation coach, along with a K-5 specials teacher at South Henry School Corporation, where I get to teach the STEM curriculum, hence my mural, as well as work with teachers as a technology integration specialist, and all the fun things. And so this book has just been an incredible opportunity to invite a voice, a thought process into the conversation in my head. And then it's provided me just some amazing brains to share that with. So thank you. I'm excited for today.
And I'm Diana Knox. I am a technology instructional specialist at Clay Community Schools in Brazil, Indiana, in addition to being an innovation coach. I also, along with these other two lovely ladies, we are ISTE certified educators. And that is a process that helped bring us kind of closer together. And actually, some of these discussions came out of that. So, we're going to dive right in. Chapter 9, such a short, brief chapter, but it sets the stage and talks about what is collective action, and it sets the stage for the part 4 of the book that gets into how each individual group can take their collective action. So diving in, if we think about that, it means, collective action is solutions oriented. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, don't have the idea that because this problem is already quite large, everybody has a smartphone, all the kids already have them, that we can't tackle and come up with some type of solution to help rein in some of these things. So, think about solutions oriented, and just think in our world, when we find products to be dangerous, they're recalled, they're kept out of the market until a design can be recorrected, or they are redesigned and the newest iteration of them comes out with, thinking about seatbelts. That was one of the examples in the reading, that cars didn't always have seatbelts. And then we decided that there was way too many injuries from auto accidents. And so that was the measure that was put into place. So there are things that we can do with our technology-based challenges that we're facing. What else can we talk about with our setting the stage for this collective action piece, ladies?
Well, I think that it just gives us that mindset that we're not helpless. Like, it's not too late. It's mm-hmm. never too late. And sometimes it feels that way. Like, it feels mm-hmm. like, oh, it's so far gone. Like, all these kids have these this technology mindset, and technology's immersed so much into our lives and their lives, even though they're so young, and we can't go back. And I think that we have to step back and say, okay, nobody's asking us to go back. There isn't, we can't rewind. Mm-hmm. So we have to stop, and as a collective action, as a society, almost like, what can we do? Okay, what's the right thing? That's where we have to stop and say, okay, what's the next right thing to do from here?
I loved that it just right from the beginning was like, no problem too big. Like, we can do this, mm-hmm. and I also really appreciate about this author how it's continuously referred to as a global conversation, not just United States or not just, one country. And so with that, one of the things that I also appreciate are, if it's going to talk about solutions, bringing some solutions of how we can maybe even start doing this, right? How can we even begin to have the conversation? Do we even know who to have it with? And then do we know what solutions are possible? I think I've mentioned this in a few episodes prior, but I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I'll never forget holding her on my maternity leave. And there was a family friend that came to visit us, and they showed me their smartphone, and they're like, "Have you seen this?" And I was like, "What is this?" And they're like, "There's this thing called the App Store." And I was like, "Ooh," And so it's like I've seen over 15 years just how that one specific piece of technology has grown among many other components, right? And so, at the end of the day, what is still the same that has not changed because of technology is the idea of fitting in, the idea of peer pressure, the idea of, everyone, when we're like, well, everyone has this, or do you just really mean a few kiddos? And really how that has grown over the years. That really struck a chord with me personally.
Well, and I think too, they call sometimes these collective action problems are called traps. And it's something that we can all fall into because it seems like you feel pressure to make a decision because everybody else is doing it, even if you aren't sure it's the right decision. And in these traps, it's not just the human consumer, the parents and the students getting caught in that. It's the companies getting caught in that because it's their business, it's their livelihood. Schools are facing some of those challenges. And so I think that we have to think about the different types of collective action so that we can jump in. And then today we're going to specifically focus on governments and tech companies. So I like that he's broken the chapters down. So chapter 10, when we get ready for it, is going to focus on specifically collective responses like voluntary coordination, social norms and modernization, technological solutions, and then laws and rules. And we're only going to look at it from that idea of governments and tech companies today. And it was fascinating for me because I didn't think about it in quite this way before.
Right.
Yeah. So Diana, you said the traps, like there's two sides there. Like parents want to make sure their child has whatever everybody else has. They want to make sure their child feels included. And then the teens or the preteens or however old they are also are in that trap because they feel pressured to be doing what the other kids are doing and having what the other kids are doing. And sometimes it's having the same accounts so that they're not left out socially. And we talked about that before. And so that's where all those traps come in that, it's that fitting in and it becomes such a social issue, and that's where it's like you have to step back as a society and say, okay, what can we do to prevent that from happening globally?
Yeah.
On a big scale.
And, thinking about like early motivation for these companies, they needed to consume our attention and our time. And how do they do that as much as possible? Because here's the piece that I knew this to be true, but I hadn't maybe admitted it to myself. When we are offered something for free, we are usually the product. So we're not the customer here because to make their money, they are selling advertisements, they are getting sponsorships, they are doing things. So I, the human, I am the product. And so the customers that they're serving are the companies who they make their money from. And so we think about these businesses, you can't blame them. It is like they're fighting for survival. They've got to figure out how to gather, attract, maintain, and keep as many customers and consumers as possible, because if they lose consumers, they're going to lose their customers and they're going to lose money, and it's an existential threat.
Right. And it also becomes an ethical debate of how far is too far.
Yes.
I mean, we were even talking too, and this really wasn't discussed in the book, but it was something that I was thinking about, like everybody has one. And remember like the new every two with like, your devices. And it seemed like just at the end of that second year, your battery just happened to start, failing. And so you're like, oh, I guess it's time for a new phone. And so it's just kind of wild because not only were we constantly replacing it, but like, where are all those going? So then it's like an environmental concern too.
Mhm.
I mean, I thought, oh no. So like when you just said ethical, I thought, oh my goodness. I know that like there was a few caveats that were discussed, and I just thought it was super interesting. Did we discuss the 4 types of collective responses? I don't know. Okay, good. I wanted to make sure that we did that. But again, talked about universally acceptable and that the suggestions to implement them may not be right for you. That's something else, that our author Jonathan does, where he just is very, I feel like, aware of who may or may not be reading the book. And then of course, I wanted to bring up, there's an online supplement that goes along with this book. So if you are reading and following along with us, be sure that you go to thatanxiousgeneration.com where there's an online supplement where there's updated information, also additional suggestions and so forth. I just thought that was super wonderful. I just suggested this book to a coworker today and just couldn't lift it up enough as far as just, again, how I started this today, an opportunity to have a conversation and to consider many different viewpoints.
It's a good thing to mention.
Yeah. Were you guys fascinated when we got to the point in the chapter 10 where it talked about governmental policies and that Google employed an ethicist?
Yes, I actually put in there, I'm like, how does one get that job? ? Because I don't think my guidance counselor was telling me about that as an opportunity for a position.
But the story I found for him was fascinating, that as the ethicist, that's not an easy word for me to say, right. I apologize, for Google, it was a man named Tristan Harris, and he would call attention to the idea that Google, Apple, Facebook, they had products that were capable of shaping how humanity spent our limited resources of time and attention. And even though that consideration was made known, we didn't see a lot of reaction from big tech because they are profit driven. And so he actually left his work in big tech and he formed a Center for Human Technology in 2015. And he has gone on to advocate for the consumer, or the consumer. Yeah, because big tech was exploiting our psychological vulnerabilities by playing into the things that would addict us and keep us moving, which then in turn brought damage to, could potentially bring damage to companies, because we are the customer. We're not the customer, we're the product in a consumer economy, or an attention economy. Sorry.
Yes.
And so they're vying for our attention. The attention from us is what they want, because that's how they can, the doom scrolling, and you get into one video and then it pops up another video that's similar. And so the algorithms pick us up so quickly. Those AI powered systems learn what keeps our attention and it directs more of that content to us. And so then that's how, before we know it, what I thought would be a quick 5-minute jaunt into social media becomes an hour.
Yep.
Or more.
And the companies aren't, even the ones that say you have to be 13 to have an account, they don't do anything to enforce that. You just have to check a box. So without that effort to restrict it, I know that now there are some more measures in place to try to get that, to ensure that the account holder actually is 13, but initially that was not the case. It was just simply checking a box to say that you are 13. And if you really aren't 13, I don't know how you can, indicate that on your own. But the companies really weren't. So they needed that ethicist to follow through on that part for sure.
I love the suggestions that he came up with to talk about what can governments and ag tech companies do to end the race to the bottom of the brainstem, or that piece that triggers our desire to just keep scrolling. They had some really good suggestions. I think there were 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they needed to assert a duty of care that create an actual moral and legal responsibility for companies and how they're treating minors specifically. And so set that privacy high initially in the adolescents accounts rather than the content be wide open. And so it's reverse of what actually happens. Like right now, you set up an account, well, and everywhere you set up an account and content is wide open. And then if you want to create limits as a parent or as an account holder, then you can create your limits. And so what this one is saying is do the reverse. When you set up the account, have it slim, and then you need to open it up, then you can do it from there. So I think that makes sense as far as a duty of care.
Do you know what I thought about? Remember when we used to rent movies and there was the warning screen in the beginning, and that was the one part you could not fast forward through? I feel like when kiddos, like, you know, when they create an account, it's like there should be like a warning screen that's just like warning, you know, if you are younger than 13, then, you know, you might be highly sensitive to social status and social rewards, and snap streaks or other things may be highly addictive. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, like we used to do that. Like we figured it out on like physical tapes, like, you know, just things like that. I don't know. I thought that was very well done. The assert duty of care, and then raise the age of the internet adulthood to 16. That seemed to be like a dance over the years. Did you guys kind of pick up on that in the book?
Yeah.
That there was like a negotiation that happened.
Yeah. The politics of it. It gave us kind of an insight to how, you know, the politicians can know what's right, but they're still also motivated and influenced by big tech, or the, you know, the political pork barrels, I think they used to call them, like, you know, you get some of that in there. But yeah, so that was interesting because that's how we reached this magical age of 13, even though we know that 16 may not be the perfect age either, but it is a great start because it's probably when our youth are through developing some of those highly affected, you know, things that make us tick. We should be through that development, and be a little bit more easier for us to rein it in, so to speak.
Well, and then he talks about, like, you know, we expect liquor stores to enforce age limits. We expect, you know, police officers to enforce driver's license age limits when out on the road. But even before that, you know, just even getting your permit, we expect, you know, we're all getting ready to vote, hopefully. And so, like, you know, that we expect age limits with that. We are enforcing that. That has not gone away. And, you know, we're talking about minors entering, I loved how he said, entering into a contract with a company to use the company's products and not necessarily be fully aware of the mental ramifications of that.
Because who reads the terms and rules, right?
Well, and some of that I can't understand. So how could a 13-year-old?
Correct.
Well said, Melissa. Oh my goodness. Well, we were talking about, you know, facilitating
verification,
and I mentioned, you know, not being able to fast forward through it. But
this is my favorite one. I like this one.
Good. Okay. Yes. So one of the things that I love, again, solutions are given. There's 3 methods. Network of people to vouch for each other. Can you imagine if Nana got a call? I'd be like, whoa, Nana's got to verify. She'd be like, and issuing a blockchain token to anyone who has been verified once by a reliable method. This was fascinating to me. And then using biometrics to establish identity. I guess I need to know a little bit more about that one. Fascinating, little scary, but fascinating. I don't know. What did you guys think?
Well, but even to the concept that you could add to devices, like when you I buy my child a new phone and I click a button on the setup of that device, identifying that they are under a certain age. And then that automatically puts all of these verification pieces into place with one swoop that then I can control what apps they download, what content they create, because it's going to set up those parental notifications in a way that is easy for people to facilitate.
Yes.
That is the obstacle that happens now. There are ways that parents can set up some of those checkpoints and parameters, but it's not easy to do.
And it's different for each platform. Like I find that I'm with my iPhone people and I'm with my Galaxy people. And it's sometimes, well, it's, a lot of times it's two separate trainings, you know, and then just also many of them are, you know, of my age where we didn't grow up with it. So we're learning it too. You know, we're learning this new language as well.
Yeah. The fourth option that they talked about was phone-free schools. And we know here in Indiana, that was a law that was passed that different districts are navigating what works for them in terms of compliance with this new law. And he's an advocate for no phones the entire school day. They go into a locker or a pouch at the beginning of the day, and they can come out at the end of the day. I think districts have found a happy medium for what works for them, you know, because you have to factor into the parent voice in your community. And when we talk to parents, a lot of times the sad reality is that they want to be able to reach their student. You know, I always hear the what if something happens? What if there's a violent act? Or what if something happens? I want to be able to easily reach my child. And so I think that the phone free thing is something that we're working toward here in Indiana in different capacities. Yeah. And I think we've seen a little bit of a difference already.
You know, I've shared this experience, I think, with you two personally, but I'd love to share it with our audience. I've had this amazing opportunity to work with IU, Indiana University School of Education students. And it's just, you know, a lot of question and answer time, a lot of like planning time together so they can really see like what it's like to work with a teacher in real life while they're still in class and maybe not quite ready for student teaching experience. So I give you that background to share that one of the top questions recently from these students is, how are you managing cell phones? How are you managing, you know, these new laws? And what is the response of children? And Diana, much to what you said, you know, I shared that it's, you know, it's a growing phase still. Schools are trying to figure out what works for them, their community. You know, some of us have quick opportunities and ways of reaching parents through maybe software we've purchased as a district. But at the end of the day, yes, if there was a violent act, yes, if there was an emergency, it would be difficult to specifically reach your child. And I thought that was super interesting. And so, you know, it is top of mind. And one of the things, you know, that we kind of want to bring chapter 10 to an end is, what can governments do to incentivize more and better real world experience?
Because of that hypersensitive, overcautious parenting style that also was coming about. Because now what has happened in that world is what people fear, like, I could get the law enforcement called on me if I leave my child at home by themselves too soon, or if I let them walk to the park by themselves and somebody, you know, a concerned neighbor calls. How do we keep those kinds of things from happening?
Right. Well, and like I said at the beginning, we can't rewind. We can't go back to 1985. So we have to say, like, here's where we are now, and what can we do to change it, to change life as it is, not life as we wish it to be, but what can we do? And so I think as far as incentivizing, we want to create a world with more real world experience. Yes. And so the first thing is, let's stop punishing parents for giving children that freedom and those experiences that we want them to have. That's one of them.
So making sure the law set them up for success. They're not conflicted.
Yeah. So, you know, we need to let parents parent.
Absolutely. And then go back to encouraging more play in schools. He talks about a play-based childhood. We've lost some of that, and giving kids those opportunities to learn those people skills, those social skills, and disconnect a little bit would be healthy in a multitude of ways.
Do you guys remember some of that's going to take some professional development for teachers and school staff, because some of that has been undone.
Absolutely.
At 1000%. I mean, your elementary friend right here is sharing with you, when I went from being a half-day kindergarten teacher to being a full-day kindergarten teacher, I really thought that it was going to go from the state. This wasn't a district from the state, that it was going to go, okay, teach and then apply, explore, have more time to do that in the full-day program. And it was more like a souped up first grade, 90 minutes of reading, 60 minutes of math. And I was like, whoa. And, and again, there's a lot more to it. It wasn't all bad. It was actually very lovely, but there's, yes, more play in schools. Yes.
I found fascinating too, designing and zoning public space with children in mind. And I think about, the story that back in the day, there were small parks in the little neighborhoods and corner stores that kids could walk to and go to. And now when we get, maybe our cities are developed, we've lost some of that. But it's interesting because in the last several years, I've heard when people come in, we just did a big study in my community. And one of the things that we talked about was that very thing, needing to take care of our elderly people, but also wanting to make sure that our young people had opportunities. And it was designing. Now there's this push to design communities and neighborhoods that give you back that local access, where there's a store I can walk to, there's a laundromat I can get to. The services that I need are handy. And I think for children, that would be a very healthy thing, because it could let us go back to giving some of that real world freedom.
I used to love riding my bike to the drugstore to get a candy bar or some gum. I mean, absolutely. Zoning is everything. And one of the things that I don't think we realize is that power of community, of village, and then vocational education, apprenticeships, youth development programs. Oh my goodness. Y'all have heard the three of us talk maybe on other, live streams or topics, but it really comes down to the same thing. I'll never forget listening to my father, who is a professional in the business world, tell me, no, college is not for everyone. We need everyone to be in touch with their giftings. And maybe that gifting doesn't require a 4-year undergraduate degree. Maybe it requires an apprenticeship so they can be truly amazing at what they were, supposed to do. And that is really on that purpose work kick, that world of work, hot topic that a lot of us are talking about in our schools, but really talking about with children, which I think is super important.
Yeah, those are just a few ideas that the author shared that governments and big tech can do to kind of start to think about ways that we can dial back and make some alterations to the way things are. And then, I'm excited. The next chapter 11, gets into what schools can do. And full disclosure, I haven't read yet, but I'm excited to read that chapter because, of course, that applies directly to us working in schools and some of those possibilities. So anything else we can think to add for chapter 10 right now, ladies? Anything you can think?
No, I thought this was a good chapter to read after our last couple that felt very heavy.
Yes.
This one felt like, okay, there's hope. There's hope for the future.
Yes. And again, Amy mentioned this, but I love that he said, here are some things we can do. And these are going to be evolving. There's going to be changes because we live in this world that change is happening very fast. And so I love that he set up an avenue for us to kind of keep up with that. And I'm excited for the rest of part 4 here. So I guess that kind of draws our time today to a close. We are looking forward to getting back with you in a couple weeks to talk about chapter 11, what schools can do in this collective action piece. But we're so grateful that you have spent some time with us, whether you joined us live or you are catching up along with the playlist on YouTube. This is definitely a hot topic. It's one that can incite a lot of conversation, and it's very timely. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for letting us be a part of your conversation.